just hit the 4-mile mark for today. Things are going pretty well as far as heart rate training is going. Had some difficulties at the outset. Heart rate was spiking within the first like 100 meters or so. But I did some readjusting, made sure that I had better contact. I lowered the chest strap on my body a little bit, and things seem to be going okay. But we are nearing the point where things went super crazy yesterday, so we'll see how things go. 9.82 miles, 9 minutes, 16 seconds per mile today. Had a fantastic time out there. I've never been so excited to run 9-minute miles, but today I was able to kind of manage or figure out heart rate training or low heart rate training. And for the most part, I was able to keep my heart rate within the zone that I've been looking for, which is the 135 beats per minute to the 145 beats per minute. The only thing that I did differently today was I repositioned the heart rate sensor. Now for the last 2 days, and even a little bit further before that, I've been running with the heart rate chest strap monitor again. But I had so many difficulties with it yesterday, and I've always thought that that thing, the chest strap, is kind of the gold standard for kind of consumer level accuracy in heart rate monitoring. And so it never occurred to me that it could be off. But someone on Instagram, Ben Johnson 763, commented very early on after I posted some of my frustrations that this tracing looked a lot like his tracings when he's running in colder weather and the heart rate monitor isn't conducting a signal well. And so that was really eye-opening to me and had me thinking about it. And so when I started out today, I did make sure to kind of moisten the sensor areas before I'd put it on, just like I had done the day before. But when I went out today, within the first couple 100 feet of running, the heart rate started spiking in an unusually high way. And so that had me thinking back to this comment on Instagram. Thanks, Ben, so much for that, because after a couple of minutes of trying to fight it, jogging, I thought there's no way that my heart rate is kind of spiked this high, unless it could be an indicator that my body isn't really recovered at all. So I kind of kept that in mind and kind of was starting to settle into the fact that, okay, this might be an entire day of just running or mostly walking. But I decided instead to try and re-moisten the sensors, kind of like licking my fingers and then getting them rubbed on the sensors. So I was like lifting my shirt up in the middle of the park when it was chilly out, low 40s for today. But I also lowered the sensor on my chest. So now normally where I have it placed is kind of like right under the pectoral muscles. But I do think that, and I'll talk about a couple of things that are irregular, although I still think within normal limits, about my own kind of anatomy. So I think I'm not bird chested, but I do have a little bit of a concavity right underneath the pectoral muscles, or I'm not sure if it's a concavity or I have a protrusion of like the bottom part of my rib cage all the way towards kind of where my diaphragm is. And something that a doctor once mentioned to me when I was in my early teens, saying that this is something that we don't have to do anything about it now, but when you're a much older man, you might have to worry about it. So fast forward to when I'm a much older man now, and I'm not worrying about it, but I think that created kind of a difficult spot for the sensors to be able to pick up my heart rate. And so what I did was I lowered the heart rate on my chest just a little bit lower, so that way it was more kind of flat against my chest and not kind of in that concavity that's right below my pectoral muscles. And so once I did that, then everything kind of normalized. The heart rate monitor gave me a very stable reading. It wasn't jumping all over the place. Whatever the heart rate was at, it would kind of stay at. And it would behave more like I kind of expect heart rate to behave. That was really reassuring. But I was also like cautiously optimistic because what has typically been happening is that after about 20 minutes of activity, my heart rate would kind of finally settle down. It would be really high, or it would be easy to get it higher up in the beginning because my body's warming up. after about 20 minutes or about 2 miles, everything would kind of settle in and the heart rate would kind of normalize in that 135 to 145 range. And I could just kind of not think about it quite so much and just run at a steady pace. When I got to about the halfway point for today's run, which was 45 minutes was my goal for out and back, so that 45 minutes out and 45 minutes back, I started to get nervous because that's when everything went haywire yesterday. But I hit the turnaround and everything was still perfectly fine. And so I was able to maintain that heart rate and even push it a little bit, not in terms of like pushing it, working hard, but I didn't have to stay kind of like towards that 10-minute per mile mark, but instead I was at the 9-minute per mile mark, or kind of in that range, floating anywhere between like 9:30 to 9:15, even towards the end, pushing it all the way up to about 9 minutes per mile. And so that was really reassuring today that I could maintain that heart rate for about an hour and a half worth of time, about an hour and a half worth of effort. It felt really good, felt really gratifying. I've never been so happy to run 9-minute miles in my life. And it had me thinking that if I can do that, I can live with 9-minute miles, at least for a little while. I'll be running the Houston Marathon in January. And so I like 12-week training blocks, 10 weeks of work, 2 weeks of taper. And that already starts putting me at week 1 next week. And so this week was really important in terms of being able to nail down whether low heart rate training was even going to be an option for me. And I still think I'm not going to use it for the entire 12 weeks. And so at a certain point, I'm going to have to switch over to a more traditional kind of training approach. But I do at least want to get a consistent block of time, however small it may be. Hopefully it'll be at least 4 more weeks of this, that I can give this a shot. And then I'll switch over to something that's more akin to what I've been training at. This time, hopefully though, with the addition of some strength training as well. I'm thinking about once, maybe twice per week. So not pure MAF training, because I think when you're kind of transitioning to MAF or low heart rate training in this model, you're not supposed to be doing any weight training at all. But I'm going to kind of venture away from the guidelines in that regard. Plus, I won't have the full amount of time, the months, even years required to kind of master that to begin with. So I'm already not doing it like kind of by the book. So I have to kind of adjust and adapt it for what I think I need in the time that I have, which may be a little bit short-sighted, I admit, but we'll talk more about kind of my marathon training plan and what I'm going to do, why I'm going to do it once I'm kind of put some numbers to paper or put some entries in my Google Calendar next week. But something else that a lot of you guys were commenting on was you're wondering how I got to this 135 to 145 range, that it seemed pretty narrow, that it seemed off based on what kind of a max heart rate would be. But I'm not using max heart rate at all. According to the MAF method, one of the nice things about it, if you use his formula, is that you don't need to calculate a max heart rate or extrapolate what a max rate heart rate would be based off like 220 minus age plus this minus that. His is 180 minus age plus this plus that. So it's a little bit different, but the MAF formula is 180 minus your age, and then if you're injured, you subtract 5, or if you're not injured and you're in relatively good health and in good shape, you add 5. So I'm at 180 minus 40, my age. I'm not quite 40 yet, but I will be soon. So for all intents and purposes, 40, and then plus 5 because I'm still recovering, so it's not quite an injury, so it's not 0, but it's not -5. But I do feel like I'm in good aerobic shape, compared to the regular population, and so I'm bumping it up to 145. So from there, with that 145 number, I'm going 135 to 145. It's kind of my working range, and all of my runs are hopefully for the next 4 weeks, as long as I can make this work for me, and as long as I have runs that are more like today and less like yesterday, then I think I could at least give it another 4 weeks, giving me about 5 weeks of training on this method. And then I think at that point, I'll have to make some decisions. So that's kind of where my head's at. That's where I'm going. Thanks, Ben Johnson 763, for pointing that out. And then lots of others who have been running for years using heart rate. You guys have also been really helpful. You guys all kind of came to the same conclusion looking at some of the tracings, looking at the data, that there's something wrong with the device, which that was kind of the last thing that I was going to blame. But I think that that's right based on kind of just the quick fix of moving the sensor to a different position where I felt like it was more, even though it was further away from my heart, I think it was still not far from my heart, but also just pressing against my body a little bit more snugly, a little bit more solidly. I think in these cold temperatures, that made all the difference for me. Now, I also heard from a lot of you who are thinking that I'm focusing way too hard on the heart rate, on the numbers, looking at my watch way too much. Yes, you guys are completely right, all those things. But generally my approach whenever I'm trying something different is, even if I can't give it a full marathon training block or even a full 3 months, 6 months, or a year, like I won't be able to give MAF training in this scenario. To the extent that I'm trying something new, I try to do everything like dogmatically, rigidly to the book. So that way I'm not injecting my own kind of hesitations, reluctancies, subconscious biases into it or against it. I just want to let the plan rise or fail kind of on its merits. That's always kind of been my goal, is when there's a new plan, if something's written out for me, I'm going to follow it. I'm going to hit that and exactly that, and that's always my goal. So I'm going to try to hit 135 to 145 and exactly that, and see how long that I can do that for, and we'll see how things kind of change. Well, so the plus side of yesterday's kind of fiasco for me is that I've got a baseline, which I knew what the baseline was anyway, but now you guys have seen the baseline too a little bit more concretely. You've seen where it's at. I think right now, I mean, most of my training runs for the last marathon training block were usually in like the 7:30 to 8 minute per mile, not counting speed work, but all the other runs. And the training block before that, most of my miles were at about the 8 minute per mile kind of pace for the vast majority of that training block. So that's kind of where the training paces were to begin with. Yesterday and today, trying to stay at that 135 to 145. I think I'm more in like the 9:15 to 9:30 per mile. So a substantial decrease, not an overwhelming decrease in kind of what I need to do to kind of follow this new way. But that's kind of where we're starting, and we'll see where we can go. Thanks everyone so much who helped me, especially the people that gave me words of encouragement, even people that were venting frustrations as well. It's just sometimes it's really good to commiserate with someone and have someone that relates to what you're going through. So that was really, I felt bad that you guys are experiencing some difficulties too, but it was great for me to understand that I'm not the only one going through it. So that was really helpful as well. So thank you everyone who contacted me on Twitter, Instagram, and here in the comments as well. It's very much appreciated, and I do read all the comments that are there. But so for now, that's all I have to say about low heart rate training. I'm probably not going to talk too much more about it on a regular basis until I get a little bit more miles in, a couple more weeks of this kind of training into it. So if you're not that interested in the heart rate training talk, don't worry. I won't be kind of harping it. It's not going to be like every day, this is what I'm talking about kind of thing. But it's just kind of, this was a weird kind of hiccup or speed bump. And so I think it needed to be addressed a little bit before I could move on. Before I go for today though, I do want to remind you guys about the charity runner for this week. This week is Adalto Castrejón, who's running the New York City Marathon in just a couple of weeks and raising money for New York Roadrunners Team for Kids, a program that introduces youth through programming into the joys and benefits of running. I was very happy to donate $70 to his fundraising efforts, and I'll post a link in the description in case you'd like to learn more. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it to the end of the video, and I'll see you all tomorrow.
Yo, what's going on?